Hello, everybody. This is Neil Allen, the creator of the comic series Zatswan Multiversal Guardian, which you can read for free at my website, zatswan.com. And today we're talking about how comic companies like DC and Marvel cannot reach new audiences and the whys behind that. And I'm joined today with my girlfriend. Would you like to say hello?
Hello.
Okay, so you are actually an example of you're a young woman, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're an example of the type of reader that Marvel and DC would love to have. They create characters and they do initiatives that try to reach this type of person. There are characters like Captain Marvel or the Wasp, or and so on and so forth, that are geared toward getting, that type of reader, but they just cannot seem to reach that sort of reader. It's always out of their grasp. They cannot reach them. They cannot even speak to them. They cannot even get their products in front of them in many cases. Um, so you are a comic reader, though, regardless of all that. Like you do read comics, correct?
Yeah, I enjoy web comics. And I also do go into stores that sell comics, like paper comics. Or
Right. So you do like board games and you do like trading card games.
yeah, and I enjoy going into like game stores as well to
Okay,
look
so
at
then
those things and get them.
yeah, but you are not going there to buy Batman comics or Spider-Man comics or any of those comics, though, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay, you read webtoons primarily, like, right? When you do read comics, that's where you read the comics that you read.
Yeah, usually. It's usually on Webtoons.
Okay, how do you discover the comics that you want to read on webtoons? Like, we know you read them on webtoons, but we know there's like a selection. How do you decide upon what comic that you want to look at?
Well, so when you first make an account, it gives you like a bunch of different you pick the genres that you like. It shows you some art styles that you can choose, and then based upon your answers it gives you recommendations. And the more comics that you like read and subscribe to, the more recommendations that it gives you that are similar to those. And there's also, it breaks it down by genre and everything too, so it makes it really easy to kind of sort through the different types of comics that are on there. And, you can kind of skim through by genre, by art style, and find them that way.
Okay, so why we've come to this particular topic is because one discussion leads to another one. Not that long ago, we did a pretty deep discussion on the concept of legacy characters and why fans of Marvel and DC oftentimes don't like them. Um, they have trouble like introducing new characters, like totally fresh ideas. I shouldn't say new characters. They have trouble introducing totally fresh ideas at Marvel and DC. And so instead of doing that, what they will do is they'll simply create a new character, but then they'll have that character take over, say, Green Lantern's identity, and then the old Green Lantern will be set aside for a time until they want to bring it back, and
Hmm.
so on. So I wanted to ask you, uh, from your point of view, and taking into consideration everything that we did go over in the previous discussion, like what you've learned about legacy characters and so on, why do you think that superhero comics have difficulty finding new audiences? I know you don't read these types of comics, but like I said, you do read comics. You do go in places where those comics are even sold, yet you're that person they're not reaching really. Why do you think that they aren't reaching you and others like you?
Well, I will say, for me, part of it is that they are kind of just overplaying and replaying the same characters. And it kind of, for me, it kind of gets old. One of the things that I like about the webtoons comics are, if you find a comic that you really like, you can go to that creator's page and look at the other comics that they've done. So even whenever the particular storyline is finished, it's satisfactory, and like, of course I would love more, but at the same time, it can get to a point where there's just no more to say, and
Uh-huh.
then you don't really want to keep reading that. So instead of them dragging on one story forever and ever and ever, they have multiple different characters, multiple different stories, and that can be really interesting, because if you find a comic you really enjoy, you can look at the other comics by the same creator, and they're usually just as good, but a whole fresh new idea.
Oh,
And that's one thing that I really enjoy. So I think, in part, some of the industries like Marvel and DC, they've just really overplayed their characters and their heroes to the point where it's so repetitive and it's not nearly as interesting.
well, I have heard that before, and the reason why I brought up those legacy characters earlier is because the rebuttal, and I have seen this rebuttal many times, the rebuttal of creating a brand new concept is that that concept will not sell. The audience that we have does not want is not interested in this fresh concept. They're interested in reading Green Lantern. So if we want to introduce a female Green Lantern, for example, or a Green Lantern of a different demographic, or rather, if they want to introduce a new character, a new female character, or a character of a different demographic, they'll make that character a Green Lantern. Um, to try to reach, that audience that they're not reaching. Yet you're telling me that you, at least as an individual, you do not need you do not need a concept that's been around for decades to get invested in that concept, to check out that concept. Um,
Right.
okay. So
I think
what
the
do
other thing too is, I know we talked about this a bit in other videos, but also just the continuity. I mean, I'm honestly more likely to go back and reread one of the Webtoons comics over and over again, because the storyline is good, it has continuity. I really enjoyed the comic, and after so long, it kind of feels fresh again. So I'll go back and reread them sometimes.
yeah,
But whenever you have a story where there's so many plot holes and just no continuity at all,
right.
I mean, it makes it really hard to get invested in the world building and the characters, because it's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, and that's a problem that DC and Marvel really have these days. Their continuity is so broken, and it doesn't matter. They've rebooted things so many times, and each time they do it, they break their continuity even more to where the reader really doesn't even know what is in continuity anymore. They don't know what counts. And they will literally disregard even their recent continuity. And like a thing that you may have read 6 months ago, this isn't an exaggeration. You may be questioning whether or not that thing is even in continuity anymore, because now they don't even need these big, giant, dramatic reboots to make you question whether or not an event happened. Now all they have to do is just disregard and contradict it. It's like gotten that bad.
Yeah. And I just
So
don't understand how someone can enjoy reading something like that, because it's so hard to keep track of like what's going on, what's canon, what's not canon, what part of the story is really matters or doesn't, and it kind of makes nothing matter at all. So I just personally don't understand, um, as a reader, wanting that to continue. I would much rather have a really good storyline with continuity, but when it comes to an end, it comes to an end. I mean, so many examples of movies that were like a huge hit, and then they come out with a sequel and it totally bombs, and it's just because the original was really great, and then they tried to like stretch it out to the point where it's just not the same. And I think
Well,
that's kind of what is happening a bit with the comic industry.
I will shed some light on this, and I'm already seeing a big discrepancy between you and fans of Marvel and DC, like a big, massive one.
Hmm.
Um, the reason why readers, I would not say that they want broken continuity for the most part. They don't. I will say it's something they tolerate. The reason why they tolerate this is because of the characters that they grow attached to. They get to a point where every month they they have a strong desire to see Wonder Woman, not a legacy Wonder Woman, but the specific Wonder Woman character doing something, typically that paints her in a positive light. That's not to say she can't have challenges, but they don't, but as long as long as she's not being depicted as weak, ineffective, or is somehow just very stupid, they are fine enough with that depiction. Now, um, do they really care that they're seeing the same thing over and over and over again? Maybe not to the extent that you care about that, because for them it becomes this attachment with this particular character. That's where they're coming from as I see it from my observations with them.
Well, I mean, if the industry is wanting to bridge this gap of keeping their older, um, not age wise, but just their more devoted
Longtime
and
readers.
long standing readers, yeah. If they're wanting to keep their longtime readers and also reach a new audience, I still just kind of stand by, maybe continue putting out the um the same characters for the long standing readers, but if they want to reach a new audience, I mean, people who might agree with my opinion are not going to just jump in on these characters that have no continuity in their storyline and have 80 plus years of content that, I mean, do you even want to read through it if a lot of it might not even matter anymore?
Okay, I want to ask you how you work with this idea. Some people would say that readers don't need a jumping on point, that they can just jump into the middle of the story, and as long as what they're seeing is captivating, then that's good enough for them to get hooked into it. Like it creates, if it's captivating, then they get an interest in it. If they get an interest in it, they start to ask questions like, well, what is this character? Like, what is their backstory? What am I looking at? And then those questions create a desire within them to find out. So they go buy more issues of this comic. Like, that's how a lot of people got into comics, I think. They didn't necessarily come in at a quote unquote jumping on point. They simply happened to be exposed to some stimuli, it captivated them. They started wondering about it, and then they dove deeper into it. Do you kind of see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
but one of the things that I can say to that, while I do think that that's true to some extent, um, a lot of the characters are not very well written now. So even if they, even if somebody
Okay.
just started reading,
Mhm.
I don't think that it's written well enough to be
O-
captivating.
Yeah, so then there's an issue of content there. Like the content's just not strong enough
Right.
to like hook that person just simply based upon what they're seeing and what they're reading.
Right.
So that's one of the issues too. But do you feel that you as a reader would operate that way? That you could just jump into the middle of a story like that and, just hit the ground running and go with it.
If it were good enough and I came into the middle of it and it was captivating enough, me personally, I would want all the background and I would be interested enough to go back to the beginning and
Mhm.
start the whole journey. However, if the continuity wasn't there, I would lose interest.
Yeah, if you didn't know what counted, what didn't, the stories were contradicting each other.
Right. At some point, it may be captivating enough to get me interested, but once I start really delving into it,
Mhm.
at some point when the continuity stops, I'm gonna lose interest.
Okay, so there's another big factor we have to consider here that I didn't touch on earlier. Um, the webtoons you are reading are free, correct?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Now, I think we do have to like bring this in because it's a giant difference maker. The comics that are sold at the shop are not free. So, do you think that makes a difference at all, or not with like you choosing to read the webtoons?
It does make a difference to an extent.
Okay,
Um, I would say there are some webtoons that I have read that I would have paid for because they were really good.
yeah,
But I think that also has to do with like continuity and storyline and strength of character. Um, I'm not going to pay, and maybe even if I did pay for a comic and then it started losing continuity, I'm definitely not going to keep paying for a comic like that.
okay,
So I think that, it does make a difference. I'm more likely to read a free comic, especially if it's a good one. But if it were a strong enough comic, I would pay for it.
okay. Um, have you actually, without anybody having to point them out to you, have you actually seen any Marvel and DC comics at any of the shops that you've gone to?
No,
Do the shops sell Marvel and DC comics? Do you know?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
No idea.
So,
I haven't seen them. I haven't really looked for them, but they haven't caught my eye either. So,
okay, I see. So there is also an issue with simply getting awareness of the product as well. That's what I'm saying. How did you find out about webtoons?
um, I think I just saw like an ad for it online.
Hmm. You read your webtoons online, you said, right? Like you read webcomics.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Though, I do enjoy like I have paperback and hardcover books, and so like I do enjoy books. So
Right.
I'm not like opposed to a hard copy. But I will say that the convenience of having it online is really nice. Um,
Okay.
and this is maybe slightly off topic, but I think it's kind of also on topic with like the advertising portion. Um, I have seen advertisements for like the DC and Marvel movies and stuff. And I know that's not quite the same as the comics, but I've seen advertisements for like the story of it. But to be honest, I have no interest in even trying to jump in at this point, just because I know like the continuity's not there and it's such a drawn out story. And I think to some extent that can also affect new readers. Um, Whenever they have new characters, if they were to put out new characters, it takes a lot of time for people to see them. And you also have to take into consideration that some people who may have the same idea as me are going to see Marvel or DC or something and just kind of be like, just another Batman. It's another Superman.
So
So
you're
there's kind of already this like aversion to it to some extent, just because the industry has been going this direction for so long.
So let me just ask for clarity. When you say another Batman, another Superman, you're talking about these legacy characters?
I'm talking about both the legacy characters and just the fact that even if it is, you know, Bruce Wayne, it's like
Mhm.
how many
Okay,
movies have come out with Bruce Wayne Batman?
I see. So you're saying that just these concepts are getting kind of old. Like this
Yeah,
again, like I've seen this story uh, how many times now? So
right.
that's what
I
you're
mean,
so
it's like that combination of the legacy characters and just this
okay.
overdone, drawn out storyline and the lack of continuity. I mean, there's characters who, have died and then all of a sudden they're alive again, and it's like what the
Okay. Can I say something? Like there's something that's interesting to me. It's like you feel that you're already worn out from this stuff, even when you don't really partake in it. Now, I'm not like trying to call you out for um any sort of accusation like, well, you don't even read this stuff. Like you don't know what you're talking about. Like I'm not saying that. I think your feelings are like valid and legit, but I'm just kind of curious for you to go more into that. Like you already feel it's worn out and it's played out, even from the perspective of you who doesn't even bother with it.
right. So I guess here's the thing. When I was younger, you know,
Mhm.
I I watched like the Batman animated series, and I was a big Batman fan, and I watched like the movies and stuff as well. But there did get to a point in like my teenage years when it was kind of like there's just too much Batman, and
Yeah.
it's just like the same story over and over, and then it's the same story but like things are different, and just and I
Yeah,
just
I know
stopped,
what you mean.
and I just stopped doing that. And um my
So,
my stepdad has comics, like older comics,
mhm.
and I have read through some of them, but then I had no desire to like keep going after I'd read through some of them. And part of that is because I know to some extent that, I know the movies and the comics are different, but
Yeah.
they're similar enough that like if the movies are going to be like this, the comics probably are too. And I have no desire to go out and buy new or more comics to just kind of see the same thing.
Okay, I think that's actually a really valid thing that you said there. You feel that you've already been exposed to this thing enough, you know, that you already kind of know how it is. So when
Yeah.
you see even more of it, you're like, well, I'm already familiar with this. I think I've had enough of it, at least, you know.
Yeah. Well, that and just, you see, I mean, I haven't really watched like a newer movie, Marvel or DC, in a long time, but you just see like every year it's like another Avengers, another
Yeah.
Avengers, another event. I'm not even watching these movies and I
Mhm.
feel like I'm being worn out by them. And
But
I'm honestly much more likely to go back. And again, this is just me on a personal level. I would rather go back and rewatch the Batman animated series than watch a
mhm.
brand new Batman.
Okay, so we would call this superhero fatigue,
Yeah.
like where you're just being worn out just by the idea of these things coming nonstop at you, and you feel like even without seeing them, you've seen enough.
Yeah.
Okay, that's valid. Like that's valid. I would say you don't have to really read the comics and go through all of this stuff to feel that. Um, but that is like really enlightening, I think. So essentially with these from your point of view, um, okay, well let's sum everything up at least to where we've gotten thus far. Why do you think Marvel and DC can't find new audiences?
In part, the kind of the superhero fatigue. I think the people that maybe haven't been interested before, they are seeing it to some extent, and it's just like they don't even have to read it to kind of feel tired. In part, if they know enough about it, they probably know about the lack of continuity and just like a repetitive storyline,
So
just the
then
same thing over and over.
that would be kind of like how readers would leave them, I think. That's why I don't read them right now, in large part because lack of continuity and poor storytelling and poor storytelling tactics being used.
Yeah, but I think you don't even have to necessarily read them to kind of know that that might be going on.
Yeah, there's a thing I've seen online with comics fans is to where they try to deflect someone's criticism of something by saying, you didn't even read it. Or this is a person who hasn't picked up a comic in 10 years or 5 years or something like that. And I understand how that can sound like it makes sense, but the reality is we're making judgments about things all the time. You don't have um, read a comic to form opinions. You're forming opinions of it all the way through, just as soon as you're exposed to the thing. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, and that's the
Um,
point of the industry. The goal of the industry is for someone to not have to read their comic and have a good enough opinion of it that they want to.
yeah. So you feel
So,
that the
if someone
opposite.
who hasn't picked up a comic in 10 years has no desire, that's not what the industry wants. And their rebuttal shouldn't be, well, just give it a chance. If the person doesn't have interest, that's a problem for the industry, not the person.
I think I feel the same way, yeah. So, any other reasons why they can't find new audiences? We have to think too about like the brick and mortar specialty,
Right. I do think like
the
the lack of
visibility of the product.
characters and stuff, and the visibility is a big one. I think if the marketing were maybe better, or I know the brick and mortar is important, but I think that a little bit of emphasis on the online could reach more audiences as well, because it is a digital age, and times change, and if you don't keep up with the times, you get lost, like left behind. So a lot of people
Right.
are doing things online now. I think it's important for them to put energy into their online platform and advertising as well.
They have a very, very weak digital strategy because the reasoning is this, partially. They feel that if they go too far into digital, it's going to disenfranchise the store owners. If digital copies cheaper, then the store owners will get disenfranchised and then somehow the industry will completely collapse because of that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a tough place to be. I mean, I think at some point you get so far behind that it's just really difficult to catch up, and that's kind of where they're at right now.
Yeah, right now most of their business is the brick and mortar shops. So they don't want to completely put those out of business or wreck them. Like if they were selling, say, a comic, if a comic was at the brick and mortar shop being sold for $5, which is where they're at now, which is ridiculous considering what you're getting. Like one of those very thin paper floppy 22-page things is like $5 now. If they sold that same thing for $1 or $1.25, but just a digital version, the concern is that the market will get turned upside down. They'll put their main sales channels like out of business somehow doing that. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And another thing too is because their fan base is so kind of not with the times with what you're saying, a lot of them will say, believe it or not, if this thing goes, if the hard copies go away, if the floppies, that's what the slang term for those If those go away, they're done. Like if it goes digital, they like people who've been collecting for 30 years or something like that, they'll say they will stop collecting. So that too is like a huge factor in that whole issue. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so if you have diehard fans who are floppies only, then how would going digital kill the hardback industry?
Because those diehard fans will stop reading. Okay,
If
well,
they're still selling the floppies,
oh, okay, I see what you mean.
if they're still selling the
I get what you
physical
mean.
comics, but they also have a digital strategy, I the diehard fans are still going to want to get the um the floppy version,
The the concern would be that the diehard fans would not the comic shops are already barely hanging on, and in many cases not even hanging on anymore. So if you divide that audience of floppy only people with people who are willing to go digital, the people that leave to go digital, that loss will make it so the comic shops will go out of business, and then the floppy only people are just totally screwed. You kind of see the scenario I'm setting up?
Yes, but I think you have to do a little bit of risk benefit analysis. So if the comic shops are already barely holding on, there is going to become a breaking point, and who
Yeah.
knows how soon it could be. But if you start devising a digital, for a time you'll have the people who are diehard physical copy only and people who are digital. You might be able to get more people interested because now you have a digital option. So even if the physical copies die out, which would be a shame because there is something just really special, I think, about a physical copy of something. But
Hmm.
if they do die out, they may have, enough digital and enough new digital readers that it would be okay.
Well, this goes towards another thing that's making it so they can't get new audiences, the price. The price is intimidating, and it's something that's geared toward a diehard collector, not something that's geared towards somebody who's just trying to get into something. So they have to, like, you got into webtoons because they were accessible, because they were free.
Right.
Now you don't have to make the comics completely. Well, what were you going to say?
I was going to say webtoons are not always 100% free, depending. There are, okay, so part of the way it works is that there are webtoons, and I think that each creator can set it differently because not all of them have the same like limits,
Hmm.
but you get so many free episodes to read per day,
Yeah.
like per comic. So some of them
Okay.
are like you can read one episode for free today, and if you want to read more than that, you have to buy like early access.
So there's a paywall there.
There is a bit of a paywall. So for people who really like to they're so into it and they want to binge read, because the thing is that the creators will upload, say that there are, they upload more than what you can read. And if you just start one that's long standing, there could be 100 episodes, but you only get to read one for free today.
Oh, I see.
So there is a huge temptation of, how badly do you want to read this? And once you pay for it, it's yours. Well, not yours, but you can read it over and over again. Um, and I will say that there have definitely been comics. Now, I'm just personally not in the position to pay for multiple comics ahead of time right now, but there have been comics that I really, really wanted to. And if I had the means, I probably would have bought them.
Okay. I see.
So I,
So
I
that's a
that when it comes to, is it 100% free? Yeah, everybody loves 100% free, but if it's a crappy written story, you're still not going to read it, even if it's free. However, you don't have to make it 100% free to get people interested. People are willing to pay for really good content, but I
Mhm.
think that when it comes to accessibility, sometimes you have to get them a little bit interested before they're willing to pay for it, so they know what they're paying for.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to be willing to give them a little, or maybe give
Right.
them a little more than a little,
Right. And I mean, another thing is they could try running some sort of promotional thing. Like maybe, I mean, I don't know. They could do like if you could get the hard cover or the hard copy, and it comes with a digital as well,
Yeah,
or
they do
something
that. They
like
do
that. Like
that
they could try to do
sometimes.
some sort of promotional thing, and they could do discounted price to try to, like, you know, do, I don't know, just promote that. But I do think that Webtoons has been very successful in that of you have a preview, and if you like it, then you can keep going. And once you really get into a story, sometimes it's hard to just read, like one episode or one page at a time. You gotta know more.
Now you kind of veered, I don't know if you did it intentionally, but you didn't really um talk about your opinion of the readers that Marvel and DC does have. These people who are kind of in a sense of kind of complacency. Like they don't like a lot of the things that are going on, but as long as you're feeding them their favorite character, they're willing to put up with things. But the thing is, like, only they are like that. And apparently that group isn't really big enough to keep the industry stable. Like, so what
Mhm.
are your thoughts about that type of reader who's okay going through the motions again and again, okay putting up with the crappy continuity over and over, okay putting up with nearly anything until like you take maybe their favorite character away. That's when you start kind of seeing them raise up arms. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I personally just do not relate to that. I am not going to, but time is a precious commodity, and I'm not going to spend my time on something that I don't really enjoy, that I'm just, putting up with, I suppose. Um, I think it's kind of a shame that they're willing to do that, but I mean, hey, that's their prerogative if that's what they want to do and spend their time and money on. I do think, from a business standpoint, you don't want to lose those people because they're loyal, but you also can't only um, you can't only appease them, because you have to get some other readership as well.
Well, let me give you a scenario where everything goes to crap. There are
Okay.
those people, right? And say they're reading Superman. And then they're just coasting along reading Superman. It's not great, but it's good enough for them. There's not a lot of passion in comics at this particular time. That's kind of how a lot of the readers seem to be, from my observations. The stories, no one's really passionate about really much of any of them, but they're good enough. And, you get your favorite characters. Okay, happy enough. But then when they replace Clark Kent as Superman with another character, because again, they're trying to bring in those new people, right? So what
Mhm.
they'll do is they'll introduce a bisexual Superman, trying to bring in some new people. Then the Clark Kent fans are like, "What in the world?" Now you're hearing from them. Now they're fired up, and it's like, "Okay, you crossed the line. I really, really don't like this." But again, they're trying to reach a new audience, like you said. They're not just trying to appease them. They're trying to reach new people. So they bring in a a bisexual Superman. What are your thoughts on that whole scenario?
I mean, I
Where
just
is it going?
that's the wrong way to go about getting a new audience. I mean, you still want to try to appease the audience you have. To get a new audience, you don't want to just repeat the same character but with something changed, because what's going to happen, or what could happen, is they might see, this new Superman, But then in the back of their head, they're thinking, great, it's just another Superman. Like, either another Superman as in a different one, or another Superman as in, I've seen 50 different Superman movies come out in the last 10 years, and this is just one more, and I have no interest in even seeing if it's good or not.
I see. I see.
So
So,
I still just kind of feel like, you know, if I saw, I mean, like I said before, Batman's been one of my favorite characters since I was younger, and I haven't seen any new, like, not that I haven't seen advertisement for it, but I have not gone out of my way to see any of the new movies, any of the new series, if there are any. I haven't gone out of my way to read any of the new comics about Batman, and it doesn't really matter to me whether it comes out as a female Batman or a gay Batman or an Indian Batman. My thinking is it's just another Batman, and it's probably the same story with just a slightly different character, um, attribute.
so we watched Super Mario Brothers movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you go out of your way to watch that? Why did you go out of your way? Yeah, why did you go out of your way to watch that?
I've never seen a Mario movie, so that was kind of interesting to me. They probably exist. I've personally never seen one or like heard of one. So to me, it was kind of different because I've seen the video games, but I've played the video games, but I've never seen like a movie of it. So I was kind of interested to see what they were going to do with it, what all the characters were going to be like, in like a movie type of style rather than a game style.
Okay, so essentially, you think that the whole concepts are stale, like just another Batman, just another Superman.
Yeah, I think so. And that is kind of an interesting thing that you brought up with Mario, because I will say if another Mario game came out, I would be interested in seeing it or trying it out to play. But I think that there's a difference between like a game like Mario and an actual storyline with comic heroes, because while there is kind of an underlying story to get you invested with Mario, you already have the expectation that there are certain things that are going to be the same, because it's a game and it's not like a story unfolding before you. And I think that in part in part the whole comic thing could do with expectation. If they were expecting new story versus if they're expecting the same story just in a different way. And I think when it comes to entertainment with like movies or books or comics, a lot of people kind of want new and fresh stories, not
I
just the
see.
same over and over and over again.
I think the same thing actually would apply to a game. Um, like for example, if a game just it see this is you know that I like Mega Man, right?
Hmm.
One of the criticisms of the Mega Man games is that they're too similar to each other. You're taking like the same graphics and you're not doing you're taking the same graphics, the same gameplay mechanics, and you're just changing it kind of in the minds of some little ways. Like it's a little different. Like maybe some of the bosses are different, but it's kind of too similar to the thing they just played.
Yeah, it does apply to an extent. I guess that, that's for sure. I think that where something like Mario can has been successful is that you have things like Yoshi's Island and Luigi's Mansion, where those are two totally different settings with
Good point.
different characters. I mean, you still have the same beloved characters. You have Mario, you have Luigi, you have Yoshi, Toad, Peach, Bowser. Like those are staples, but they have different settings and different enemies, sometimes. Um, and I think that can make it like, here's this thing that I know, that I love, that I want to see more of, but in a new and different like way.
Okay, well let me approach it to you from a different point of view. Like conversely, here's what some people would try to sell you on the strengths of the comics and the way they do things. And I just want to know what you think about them. This is an ongoing story. Like it's always there. You're going to get more of it. Like, don't you kind of get sad when your favorite show goes off the air? Like, no more of it's being made. This is like an ongoing adventure, you know what I mean? And you get to come along with it and look at all this content of your favorite thing that builds up, you know?
I understand that thinking to an extent, but I personally am just no. Um, I would rather have, you know, I would rather have a certain length of really good storyline that I could read and enjoy over and over than to have just endless storyline that just starts to make no sense. Like I think it just gets to a point where it's just so overplayed.
Okay, well, that's honestly why they do these reboots because it gets old and to a point where it makes no sense. But then they're like, well, we need a fresh continuity now to kind of freshen up our characters and maybe modernize them. What are you thinking?
Right. Well, because that doesn't really work because you still have that old story.
Yeah,
You
it's not
can't
like,
you can't just, erase it. Like people loved that story and now you're just saying, "Okay, now forget about that and we're going to start over
okay,
but with the exact same character." It doesn't really work
I
that
get it.
way.
Yeah, it's like no matter how you spin it, Superman's always going to come from Krypton. His planet's always going to blow up, and he's going to be found by Jonathan and Martha Kent. And
Right.
yeah,
And if you do things the right way, like you have really good content and it's got continuity and the characters are really loved and you play it to the point that you can,
you can.
but then eventually, you have that stopping point and people, I mean, this is a huge marketing tactic that has been used before. You wait a period of time and then you do like a remake. Everyone's going to be, "Oh, that's nostalgic. I loved that show, like that movie, that show, that
Hmm.
story, that comic." And now you're doing like a reboot or a remake, but you have to give it time to
Yep, give it
settle
time.
and and for people to love it and to be able to say, "I remember that," and be
Yeah,
excited to like, delve into that story all over again because you could put out the same exact comic but with like newer, more updated graphics or something. Well, not graphics, but like drawings or whatnot.
illustrations.
Illustrations, thank you. I like can't
Yeah.
find my word.
Graphics
um
works fine
because
too.
they do that with games and movies too. They do
Mhm.
remakes, but it's like, hey, this came out in the 80s and now our capabilities for animation have improved a lot, so we're going to do a remake with better graphics on a game or a
Okay.
remake with better, you know picture for a movie. And maybe they change it a little bit, but it kind of stays true to the original. And it's like you're watching the exact same thing, you're playing the exact same thing, you're reading the exact same thing, but it's slightly different and people eat it up.
Okay, so let's sum all this up and come to a close. Here's what I have gathered from what you've told me, and correct me if any of it's wrong, or pop in if you want to add anything to it.
Okay.
Um, from your point of view, now the comics, you didn't talk about this too much, but I'll put it in there. We did talk about it some. They're hard to find. Um,
Yeah.
no, oh
I'm
no, you
sure
did
I
talk about that.
Well,
You
I'm
talked
sure
about the
I walked
digital
past
strategy.
them. I
Mhm.
feel like I've probably walked past comics and not even realized that they were there because they maybe blend in, maybe because I'm not looking for them, or maybe I'm not sure. I think that in part the marketing strategy. It's not really geared towards getting new people because it doesn't like catch our eye enough.
Right, right. It's geared toward, just getting as much as they can get out of their dwindling reader base.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so they are hard to find. They have a weak digital strategy, which kind of leads towards hard to find, but also goes into that they're not competitively priced. Um, so those are really big deals. And then they're very stale concepts. They're not getting fresh concepts in there
Hmm.
um, that would interest new people. New people, at least speaking for yourself, you're not interested in another Batman story or another Superman story. Um,
No, not
because,
really.
yeah, you feel that you've been exposed to enough of that already. You're not looking for more.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? That's a thing that that's a thing you really don't hear. You hear like a lot of these other reasons a lot, but that's when you don't really hear. Like I have heard it from like my brother who was reading manga at the time. Like he is a big One Piece fan, and I asked him like, well, what do you think about like Marvel and DC? And the gist of what he said is that's just the same thing over and over again. And he just wasn't interested in reading that. He was interested in reading his manga, and he read some webtoons as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is interesting because I mean One Piece has over 1,000 episodes or you know
but whatever they're
but
doing, there. Go ahead.
they never wrap it up and then repeat it. It's
Yeah.
just kind of it's like there's one big goal and for 1,000 episodes they haven't reached it yet. They keep going into all these different and new adventures with new people. So if you really want like a super long drawn out, I mean you see this in Japanese animation a lot and manga like Bleach. I don't even know how many how much Bleach is out there. I mean
Well,
there's thousands I'm sure, but
that's a whole topic in itself. Like the
yeah,
quality really
I
went
guess
up.
I'm just saying they're not kind of rinse and repeat. It's still like fresh and new stuff, but it's
Yeah.
not, the same thing, but try this character instead, or the same thing, but
And even with Bruce Wayne, it's like how many times can Joker break out of Arkham and
right.
you know? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. You put him in, he comes back out.
It is very repetitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the repetitive nature of the stuff, um, and the lack of fresh concepts. Like manga offers fresh concepts, Webtoon offers fresh concepts. DC and Marvel and the superhero stuff apparently aren't doing that well enough.
No, I just don't think so. I mean, even in things like One Piece, they'll see the same enemies, but they're far enough apart from the encounters. So I'm not saying, Batman defeats Joker once and he never comes back, but if it's just Joker and then Joker and then Joker and then Joker over and over and over again, it does become just so repetitive that it's like, all right, this guy
Sorry.
again.
Um, excuse me. Anyway, I think well, this was a really good discussion we had. But we don't want to get like the comics where we're just repeating the same things over and over and over again. So I think we'll probably close it up here. And um, we're open to hearing what anybody else may think on the subject. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the video description and hit the like button and recommend this channel to other people you think may be interested. And feel free to read my own comic, Zatswan Multiversal Guardian, at zatswan.com, link in the video description. And would you like to say anything before we close it up?
No, just I had a good time talking with you about it, and I look forward to seeing what other people have to say. I know obviously my opinion's not the only one, so it'd be interesting to see what other people, think and feel about this.
All right, I'm sure, they liked hearing from you, and I appreciate, you coming along for the ride. All right, everybody. Well, we'll talk to you again very soon. Take care.